basically 33% of the accepted offers that I had that week, they walked away after having the approval, having the accepted offer, and then they just kind of did that inspection and said, it's not the right fit for us. That very rarely happens.
You're listening to the Ottawa Real Estate Podcast, your go-to source for all things Canadian real estate. And now, here are your hosts, Paul Stevenson and David Warren.
Hello and welcome back to the Ottawa Real Estate Podcast, your go-to source for all things Canadian real estate. My name is Paul Stevenson. I'm a Level 2 mortgage agent. I'm joined by David Warren, Level 2 mortgage agent, owner at Referral Mortgages. And we want to take a quick second to thank all of you for listening and for being here. And to our amazing sponsors, thank you for your support. And Dave, here we are. It is June 2nd, beginning of June. The market is hot. We talked about this in February, I think March maybe, that May and June is when everything is going to happen. And it seems like that is coming true. So in the last 2 weeks, I think, lots of APSs. I would say more transactions in the last 2 weeks than any 1 or 2 month time frame leading up to this past month. And I don't know, I think we're going to have to see, numbers aren't out for May, okay, but I think we're going to have to see those days on market shorten even lower than they were at 21. How are you, David? How you doing? I just got right into it. Who needs intros? Let's get into the market.
I know. No, I agree. Definitely a lot of activity. I've had a number of clients missing out on multiple offers on rural properties. I don't know what the draw for them, has been as far as like precipitating the multiple offers on them. But I do know that, there's been multiple properties in that scenario and multiple clients missing out on different scenarios. I'm not saying that's all properties. Again, typically, like we say, it is property specific and location specific, but yeah, I've seen a number of purchase agreements this week. And I thought that was interesting too. Like I said, just having to write pre-approval letters for people putting in offers. It's been a little while since having to do that.
Yeah, you made a good, the key word that I heard you say there was rural. And I know people might just kind of fly over that, but I'm also seeing that. Like a lot of people, I think, are looking at, like we had this during COVID where it was kind of like the old drive till you buy. But just generally speaking, it seems like more people that were shopping maybe in the Canada 600 to 800 range are thinking, well, hold on a second. We can get a full single family with acreage outside the city for 700,000, 650, whatever. Why don't we just do that? You know what I mean? This is like, we can plan for the next 5-10 years. And this is kind of what we were talking about a few weeks ago, is that it seems like people are taking a step back and thinking long-term, like, hey, where do we want to be in 10 years, 5 years? And like, what's the best kind of way to structure that now so that we're better positioned down the road? And I think with all the uncertainty around jobs and, obviously people are going back to work, which is kind of hindering that move outside the city. But I'm seeing a lot of people way more open to considering a rural property versus, 5 or 10 years ago. And I know that's a very broad comment, but it does seem like I'm seeing more stuff in Beckwith, Lanark, like, not even in Perth or Smith Falls or Carleton Place, but like between all of those little communities, people are really looking for those unique one-off properties and they sell quickly. They're not staying on the market long.
Yeah, I'm finding for those clients that I have that are shopping in some of those rural areas or looking at moving, we talked about it months ago, and I kind of, you see that trend, like as people are up for renewal, and this being a massive renewal year, people are, not only thinking about consolidating debt or whether they want to do renovations because they're staying, but they find they've been in that home for 5 years and their thought around the renewal is like, well, do we see ourselves having that conversation as a family or do we see ourselves staying here for another 3 or 5 years? Or is it time that we've already outgrown the home and looking to move elsewhere? And that's what's been happening with a number of these clients that are looking outside the city, is that their townhomes are in now or they're semi-detached. Their family's grown in the last 5 years. They've gone from 2 to 4 and they're looking for some more space and things like that. So at least that's the conversations I've been having. But we kind of talked about it a really long time ago about as people are up for renewal, it gets their brain moving, conversations kind of going about rates, about their mortgage, and then forward planning, like you were just saying, like where do you see yourself in 5 years is the place that they're in. Just that. And so a lot of those people are up not till later in the year in some cases, but it's got their mind going and they want to obviously make a move before the new school year.
Yeah, and something else I'm seeing, which we talked about before we came on here, which is very unique. There was one Friday, so a week ago Friday, I got a large influx of people that had bought homes. It just seemed like that Thursday, Friday, whatever it was, I don't know, everyone went out and bought houses. Obviously, it was the one day of the week I was outside of the office. It just always happens. They say in real estate, if you want to get busy, go away for a week. You know what I mean? That's just like when things happen. But people that got offers accepted, had been shopping for a while, were, speaking about how much they love the home. It's perfect for us. Perfect. Great, great, great. Got the approvals, like submitted for approval, had the rate discussion, got the approval, packaged it, sent it to them. Then they would reach back out. Like basically 33% of the accepted offers that I had that week, they walked away after having the approval, having the accepted offer. And then they just kind of did that inspection and said, none of it was even like, oh, the house had some issues and we just thought it was a risk or whatever. It was just, it's not the right fit for us. It was kind of like they just had second thoughts, or like, they feared maybe taking that leap, or just went in and took a deeper dive and maybe were caught up in the competition or the want to buy a home in the moment they put the offer in, and then just decided, you know what, this isn't the right fit for us. And they walked away. I had multiple clients do that in a short time frame. And that very rarely happens. Like usually if there's something big, like, oh, we're going to have to replace a septic, or we have to, there was actually mold in the seal, whatever. There's always usually a reason why someone would walk away. But to just be like, it wasn't the right fit for us is rare, so to see that multiple times in a short time frame after getting the approvals, like even lenders were like, are they going to their bank? Are they actually walking away? It's like, no, they're actually like, they're not moving forward with this property, which is surprising. You just don't usually see that. So I don't know if that's a trend or if that was just kind of an anomaly for that short period of time. But are you seeing anything kind of wonky with all these sorts of transactions happening right now in this short time frame?
So it's funny you say about septic. One client, he's from out east, not enjoying being near such close proximity. Septic is on its way out, only has a couple of years left. So, again, pivoted to a purchase plus improvements to kind of tack on that 40,000 for the septic installation, so that, number one, get a new septic, rope it into the mortgage. Obviously doing it now when insured, is the best time, because obviously even when you look forward that 5 years, is there going to be a delta of equity available, because you can only go up to 80%. So that was kind of a conversation we had of, you could delay it, but there's not necessarily going to be a way of roping it into the mortgage. So, we decided to tackle it now, put it into the mortgage. Another one of my agents, which was an interesting transaction that I helped them get across the finish line, which fortunately closed on Friday. It wasn't in Ottawa. This was a Toronto transaction. The realtor did not include or did not forward along schedule, and they were holding back until basically like closer to closing. Obviously, not wise. And in that schedule was referencing that the buyer has reviewed the home inspection that was provided by the seller. They're buying it based on the issues that are outlined in that home inspection, and they're fully aware of it and all that. Like knowing that realtor, knowing that this is going to harm the deal, insured deal.
Their own realtor?
Their own, the buyer realtor did not forward that along. We got a hold of it on basically a week ago, so last Monday, with the transaction closing June 1st. And obviously then had to get a copy of the home inspection, which indicated mold in the attic, like old wiring, things like that. So I was able to kind of jump in and get it saved with the lender, of basically coming to an understanding of, okay, well, we're not going to even pivot this to a purchase plus. They wanted it done before closing.
Hold back.
I explained to the buyers, to all the realtors involved, that this is basically like your fault for not disclosing it. This deal is dead with the insurer, which the lender's walking away from as well. So we ended up having to get the buyer and the seller to sign an amendment, allowing the buyer's tradespeople to go in and remediate the mold, fix to pigtail all the wiring, and provide proof and letters from a licensed electrician. Proof of payment from the mold remediation company, proof of payment, letter stating that it's cleaned with proof, and got that proof in on. That was Monday. I had to get on the phone with the insurer and with realtor, and more importantly, lender and insurer, come to an understanding of how we were going to get this across the finish line, with everyone understanding it's a purchase closing on the Monday. I proposed kind of exactly what we ended up providing, told the buyer, he was kind of arguing, well, I've got the savings, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to be putting a new panel in and stripping the wiring. And I just said, well, Pigtailing is going to cost you $1,500. Stripping the wiring is weeks long project and means holes in walls, et cetera, et cetera. This is how you close on the property now. Otherwise, insurers walking away, lenders walking away. So it cost them $1,600 to pigtail the wiring, mold remediation for another, couple thousand. But we got proof of that and it done by Friday. Got everything in and was able to kind of save that deal. But it kind of all that to say is that it was a transaction where required, having kind of a thoughtful conversation with the insurer and with the lender of, okay, let's brainstorm this. Otherwise, they definitely would have canceled it. But yeah, it was kind of crazy that the realtor did not forward that along and was kind of trying to bury it.
So what
Yeah,
happens to
which was
that
wild.
realtor now? Like that just seems so egregious. Like it was intentional. It was like they must have known at some point it's going to come out and someone's getting screwed over. Like how do you not think that's going to come to light?
Well, I think for that reason, I think that's where my positioning of the solution really worked out because they understood that them holding this back causes rush and cause these issues. I mean, there would have had to been issues ahead of time, but there was obviously some other hair on the deal, but insurer and lender didn't want to walk away from it. With us having a great relationship with that lender, they didn't want to cancel that deal. Otherwise, if it was somebody else, they would have. But yeah, no, it was pretty outrageous and like you said, egregious, but yeah, kind of wild.
This is wild in these streets, David. It's wild in these streets out here in the real estate world. It is. I mean, honestly, it's like I talk to like clients ask me all the time, like, well, not all the time, but clients will ask, like, why wouldn't everyone work with an experienced broker? Like, I know there's people that just got licensed, and it's the same as real estate agents. Like, we all have the same license. So, like, whether someone has 15 years of experience or 15 minutes of experience, like they are able to advise you the same way. Well, they're not going to advise you the same way, but they're able to basically be your agent in the same manner. And it's wild to see the contrast of advice and strategies and everything, I find, especially on the negotiations, when you're talking about when you're a buyer buying a home, the seller of the property you're buying is paying your agent. So like use the most experienced, knowledgeable agent there is that you can find that you're aware of that's in your sphere because you're not paying. You know what I mean? Like the seller is paying for it. So you might as well use the best contract writer, the best negotiator, the best, most knowledgeable agent in that area or in your city because why wouldn't you? You know what I mean? Like there's no need to use a friend from the water cooler that's, does this part time and hasn't done a transaction in 4 years. Like it's just not in your best interest to do that. And I apologize for anyone who's a part time agent, but ultimately, like you have to look in the mirror and know that your advice is not going to be the same as someone who does this day in and day out. It's just not. It's just not the same thing.
I think
Sorry,
the same
random rant.
no, I think the same to be said about for mortgage agents, experience or even if they are newer, ensuring that they are with good mentors or a good team that has those relationships with the insurer, with the lenders. Because in a case like that, if they'd walked into a branch and that was a branch deal, that deal would be canceled and they
Dead.
would
Yeah.
not be proceeding and it would be dead because there's no one that's going to fight for that deal. And they would have been up the creek, probably going with a private lender and scrambling at the last minute and paying an exorbitant amount of money. And that's where kind of working with a professional mortgage agent acts as an intermediary and acts in your best interest of fighting for your deal, fighting to get your purchase, your refinance, your transfer across the finish line. Makes a world of difference.
Yeah. And I think we've been kind of, I wouldn't say fighting, but definitely promoting the idea of like an apprenticeship in the industry. Cause it's just that first, I mean, even now, like we've both been in the industry almost 15 years and you still see files where you're like, I've never seen this before. Like there's still stuff you have to learn. So in the beginning, when you're completely fresh or you're coming out of the banking world like I did, or you're coming out of a totally different industry like yourself, or you're just, this is like a whole new industry, but it was the Wild West. Like we just learned it as we went and, got to know our lenders and got to know clients and learned from our mistakes and can kind of continue to grow. But it's like anything, like I'll give you an example outside of mortgages, like even just a mechanic, for example, like they have an apprenticeship. And we recently had an experience where my son had an issue with his rear shocks. We went to get it fixed. They fixed it. I went with him to pick it up just to make sure everything was kosher. And we drove the car around the parking lot, just him and I, and it sounded worse than it did before we brought it. I said, something's wrong. Like, this isn't right. I'm not a mechanic, obviously, but like, it was pretty obvious that something wasn't right. Went back in, talked to the supervisor, and then the head mechanic came over and like, oh, well, he's actually an apprentice right now, the person who was working on your car, and da-da-da-da. Anyways, they looked at it, and he had basically put something in upside down, like put, I don't even know the parts, but like basically one was on top of the other when it shouldn't have been. The head mechanic went in, looked at it, and saw it instantly. But like, obviously, there's a whole dynamic here of like, why didn't they check it before? Why, that's a whole different story.
Mhm.
But the point is, like, as an apprentice who is a mechanic, he is obviously not as knowledgeable as the 35-year veteran who's seen every single
Grizzled
car, every
veteran.
single model. Yeah, like, it's different, and it's in every industry. It's not just mortgages and real estate and mechanics. It's every industry. So like, do your due diligence as the person that needs that professional. Like, make sure you're aware. Like, read the reviews, check out listen to your friends, ask people that you trust who they're using and who they turn to for advice and so on. There you go.
Even the best photographer can't hide drywall dust and paint splatter. And every day you delay listing could mean missing peak spring pricing in Ottawa. A to Z Cleaning Expert gets your property truly photo ready. Don't risk going to market half ready. Mention TowRep at atozcleaningexpert.com to receive priority scheduling for your next listing. Your home is one of your biggest investments, and the team at Big Westboro can help you protect it. Our expert brokers will find the perfect coverage to keep your home and belongings safe. Call 613-239-5792 or visit thebig.ca/Westboro for a free quote. Think big, protect what matters most. Are you thinking of buying or selling a residential property? Relationships are at the heart of every real estate transaction at Gertin-Poirier Avocat Lawyers. We love to bring residential buyers, sellers, agents, lenders, mortgage brokers, and the law together to close the deal for you for an effortless client experience that opens doors. Call us at 613-744-4488 or visit our website at gertinpoirierlaw.ca. Let's get to the heart of your deal.
Dave, big news this week. Obviously, this was kind of the bulk of what we wanted to talk about, but now we're, over halfway through the show here. Canada is officially in a recession, a technical recession, depending on who you're talking to. And really, the big question isn't whether we're in one, because I think everyone agrees on that, but what it means for interest rates, what it means for home prices, jobs, and mortgage holders ultimately in our space. So, like, what are you seeing? What are you hearing? And what are your thoughts on the technical recession that we're in here in Canada?
I mean, when you look at the GDP numbers, we've been negative 3 out of the last 4 quarters. So the last year with our change in government or leader, we've been negative GDP. We're the only country in the G7 that has a negative GDP and is in a recession, which is kind of ironic. Our unemployment rate is higher than everyone else in the G7. So it, really combined with our retraction, we've been seeing a retraction of investment spending or business spending in the marketplace, and this has been continuous. That we're seeing that contraction of investment spending by businesses. With all that being said, certainly, I think what this headline news is going to do is, number one, the June 10th rate decision by the Bank of Canada. The odds are at 100% of a no hike, no change. The same with the US. I think they're going to be really paying attention to these underlying metrics and really following that. And, we've already been seeing a lot of talk and of not only of being a negative revision of a negative GDP growth, but we're also seeing people say like, yes, it is a technical recession, but there are other metrics and things like that. And kind of, trying to change the narrative a bit, which I think is what I can certainly see not only the government wanting to change that narrative, but also the Bank of Canada, because as we know, headlines really kind of scare people as well. And what a big driver of the contraction in GDP has been, the housing market has contributed to a lot of that. The transactions in the housing market in the major metropolises of Toronto and Vancouver is one of the biggest drivers of the reason why we're seeing that contraction in GDP. So I don't think that they can have too much of a negative headline where it's scaring people from getting back into the market. So I think they're going to be really cautious with that, because we know that obviously, we've talked about it, in weeks past, of obviously, the conflict in Iran and this and oil prices being up, that this is, headline grabbing. And then in Ottawa with news of people in the federal government being kind of forced out or being offered packages, like all this headline stuff that causes uncertainty slows down the market. People are obviously, and rightfully so, worried about, making a decision on what they're going to be doing. And so I think they're going to have to tread a fine line with this.
Yeah, and I think speaking to the Bank of Canada, like they did raise rates aggressively to fight inflation, right after the printing of money during the pandemic, which then creates higher borrowing costs that slows consumer spending. The housing activity cooled for a while, and then businesses borrowing became more expensive, which we talked about for the last couple of years. So, the medicine worked on the inflation, but it also slowed the patient down, right? So, like as far as the economy goes, like people just don't feel like they have the money to go on a vacation, or, people don't experience GDP, right? They experience their grocery bill, the mortgage payment, whether or not they can afford a vacation, like real world stuff. Like that's the average person is feeling that. And the reality in Canada, the economic reality is that like Canada lost 112,000 jobs in Q1 of 2026, which is not a small number of jobs. Unemployment climbed roughly to almost 7%. Business investment has declined, as you mentioned, for 5 consecutive quarters. Consumer debt remains among the highest in the G7, which is wild. And that eventually will come to a head. Like it's not just people aren't just going to start paying off their debt in full. Like it's a long, slow, arduous process. Anyone who's had a lot of debt, we see it with clients. Like we see people, we help them restructure the debt, but like it's not something that you recover from in 6 months, 12 months. This is a multi-year plan to get out of that debt. And if we have the highest in the G7, that's going to be decades before people are able to pay that off or restructure it. Mortgage delinquencies are rising, especially obviously in Toronto. We've seen that. And insolvencies are at the highest levels since the aftermath of the financial crisis. So call it a technical recession, but just those 6 points I just mentioned, like that is scary for a Canadian economy. Now, obviously, I think we still have CUSMA coming up, right? That agreement. I know that Prime Minister Carney, at least last week, seems to have shifted his interest in working with the U.S., which, we could talk about that till the cows come home. But it has always seemed from the beginning that it was silly to to kind of brush off our biggest trading partner who essentially keeps Canada afloat from an economic standpoint. So I do see the light at the end of the tunnel that if we can find a way to mend the relationship with the US, which is essentially seeing an economic boom right now with the AI build out, the memory build out, the basically every infrastructure to build out the AI model that's happening right now is all happening in the US. They're keeping it domestic, which I think is great. Obviously, Nvidia is dealing with Taiwan, and there's a few things there which you can get into a whole global scale. But ultimately speaking, like US is economically doing well, as are a lot of the G7s coming out of the pandemic. We are not. So we're doing something wrong. They're doing something right. Let's learn from that and pivot. You know what I mean? Like we're not in the sewers yet, but we're clearly heading that way. So like we need to pivot. We have the ability to do that. We have the resources here in our country to be an economic superpower. But again, going back to the red tape, the bureaucracy, like all of the jobs that are created are basically to manage the managers of the managers to manage the management. Like it's just there's too many jobs created that aren't productive and are not creating economic growth for our country. So like that is where the focus needs to be. I do see the light at the end of the tunnel. I think Canadians want that, but we have to get out of our own goddamn way and actually have a plan of action that's going to create economic growth and make Canada great again. You know what I mean? And I don't mean that in any sort of like Trump mega thing, but like really like Canada when we grew up, Dave, was an amazing place to live. Like you could be a dog walker and a welcomer at Walmart and own a home. You know what I mean? You could be a mechanic part-time and a part-time teacher and you could own a home. Like now you're a lawyer and I don't know, successful real estate agent and you're struggling to make ends meet. Like it doesn't make sense. And we have to get back to the old way of affordability, making things affordable for the average Canadian and actually allowing people to have optimism and plans for their future and for the next generation, like their kids and their grandkids and so on. Because I think we've lost that in Canada, but it's right there. Like we're literally knocking on the door, but we have to walk through it. We can't just sit here and wait and wait and wait and read headlines and be promised a bunch of things that never come to fruition. Like we need to take action and we need to create the economic superpower that Canada should be globally.
Love it. Love the rant.
What do you think, David? And
Well,
well,
no,
yeah.
I wholeheartedly agree in every facet. We need to get back to what what we need to be focusing on. Like every country in that G7 and around the world is dealing with trade tension with the US, but their economies are still growing. They're all like, for the most part, they've all come to agreements on tariffs and things like that. We have not. So they're having a relationship there with the US. They've been able to get past and move past the issues, the trade issues that they were having, which we just keep refusing to do so and to even have those conversations. So obviously something needs to change. Hopefully that with this news of kind of that, 3 of 4 last quarters, so 75% of the last year, we've been at negative GDP numbers and unemployment growing, insolvencies at a record high. And the last time we were at these numbers were during COVID in 2020 for just insolvencies, like individual consumer proposals and bankruptcies. That's terrible. Like that obviously shows you that the underlying economy and the underlying, like you said, regular family is struggling to get by. And so that needs to be addressed and not this like just headline grabbing talk of starting a project that never gets started. There needs to be an injection of employment to the general base, to the blue collar worker in order to boost productivity and then boost our GDP and boost our standing of where Canada is, let alone just, talking like without even getting into the trade conversation, just what we do domestically.
Yeah, and I think the optimism with Prime Minister Carney coming in was that he has a lot of economic experience and that he could bring Canada back to that great economic superpower. So use that all that knowledge and make Canada the benefactor. You know what I mean? Because it is in there, but it feels like it's misguided right now. And that's why I'm saying I feel like I can see the light at the end of the tunnel because it is there. It's just not being used for Canadians, So it's a bit frustrating from that perspective. But I remain optimistic, David. I'm a forever optimist. You know what I mean? No matter whatever's happening, there's always a silver lining. And I'm hopeful that things are going to turn. We have the ability to do it. We have the resources to do it. We just need the relationships to do it. And that has really been our downfall. Like economic, superpower is there, but we need the relationship superpower too. And that's really been our hindrance. We need to put our egos aside. We need to basically stop reading the headlines, do your own research, and understand that like we need the US to be a superpower as a country. And without them, like we're going to keep going. We're going to continue trending in a recession. That's my opinion. But we'll see what happens, David. We'll see what the next few years bring.
Bringing it back to real estate though, and mortgages is, when we have negative headlines like that, it's positive for mortgage rates. We have seen, because of the conflict overseas and the price of oil being elevated, that we continue to see bond rates elevated as well. They've come down, they hit a high on May 15th, roughly of like 3.36 on the 5-year government bond on the yield. We're down to around, I think 306. I think we're down about 30 basis points. But, really in that is, and we talked about it previous episode, that people are really having to be geopolitical experts to time and look at what their rate is and what they should be looking at. There's a great article in Canadian Mortgage Trends from Ron Butler. Those that listen to this probably also listen to Ron's show or have seen him. And he says there's no question that fixed rates have risen. 5-year and 3-year fix are up. We see a lot of people being offered 4.59, and 2.5 months ago it was 3.69. So it's definitely an increase. He attributes the hikes to higher bond yields, which he says are being driven by the conflict in the Middle East. It's a very simple formula. A war in Iran equals the price of oil going up. The price of oil going up equals inflation. Inflation equals bond yields going up, and bond yields going up equals mortgage rates going up. So following this formula, He says a durable easing of tensions around the Strait of Hormuz would be needed to bring meaningful relief to fixed rates. There will be a significant reduction in fixed rates, he predicts. Once there's an ironclad deal to open up the strait, it could be as much as 20 to 30 basis points of a drop in rate. He's suggesting that buyers should try to avoid locking into a 5-year fixed rate, given the peace agreement could happen at any time. Says if you're shopping or renewing right now, unfortunately, you've got to become a geopolitical expert. If you think the war will end, you can take a variable like we've kind of spoken about almost ad nauseum, because that means that the chances of a rate hike are off the table in Canada for at least 6 months. And then if fixed rates start to fall, you have the opportunity to lock in. So, his suggestion being kind of that grizzled vet, like we were talking about earlier in the industry, very knowledgeable, kind of speaking to, exactly the strategy that we've kind of been talking about for the last few months of, looking at that variable. But it's certainly something when you compound, we can see the, effects of the oil prices drastic, like this keeping the bond yields up and elevated, because we would see it have come back down and drop with this negative headline news yesterday, which we haven't seen, because obviously all coincidentally at the same time, we obviously had news out of the Middle East that was not positive. And so that really kind of hit the markets yesterday as well. So, it's going to be, something obviously we'll continue watching. I know everyone listening is going to continue watching because it's going to be front and center as far as what our economy is doing, but then also what geopolitically is happening. It makes it tough. And kind of circling back to what we talked about at the outset of the show, speaking with professionals that understand what's going on in the market when you're talking about rates, when you're looking at a renewal, when you're looking at purchasing, having that strategic conversation around it is vitally important, as opposed to just throwing a blind dart at the board and hoping that what you choose works out.
Yeah, and the last thing I wanted to say on that, Dave, is like oil prices are pretty much like I showed the charts while you were talking there, and the oil chart 1 month, 3 months, and the bond chart are literally like if you put them over each other, they're almost identical. Like they're literally directly correlated. I mean, so it's also important, I think, for people in all facets of life to look at where you're getting your information from, because like the numbers do not lie, right? You look at the oil prices, you look at the bonds, like that is facts. That is actually what moves the needle. It's not the headline. It's not whether it's a technical recession or a real recession or whatever. Like it's all just semantics. Look at the numbers, look at the trends and make a decision. And just like look at where you're getting your information from. Make sure it's a credible source and look at the results. Don't just look at the headline. Don't just hear what someone's saying and believe it. Like actually look at the numbers, look at the trail of what's happening and look at where it should be moving forward and make a decision for yourself. That's the end of my rants today, David.
Well, should we?
Mood
That's
boost?
about time to. Yeah, that's about time to slip into some mood boosts.
All right, here we go. I got 3 today, and they're heavily birthday focused. These were from last week. And we were celebrating birthdays this week, David. It was my birthday on Saturday. And my brother's was recent. My mom's was recently. We got all sorts of birthdays here. So we got 3. Number 1, why was a birthday cake smiling? It was in tears. Which is done really the kind of intro. Anyways, number 2. You're getting old when your birthday cake comes with a smoke alarm. Number 3, why do you always wrap my birthday gifts in weird fabric? To make your presence felt. Wow. I mean, we might have been 0 for 3 today, David. We might be 0 for 3.
100% 0 for 3.
I don't usually say that, but I mean,
those are bad.
I'll talk to the producer. I'll talk to the producer of the mood boost. That's got to change. But thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Thank you for being here. We appreciate all of you. We appreciate our sponsors as well. Thank you for your support. New episodes are released every Wednesday at 10 a.m. And be sure to follow us on all of our socials. Thank you so much. We'll see you next week.
Deuces.